What is up, everyone? Welcome back to episode 81 of the Deep Drive podcast. I'm here with my co-host, James, and we are going to discuss our third baseman list. Now, I think third base has consistently been a position we've seen plenty of talent at, especially, with Nolan Arenado. You have Jose Ramirez, Manny Machado, Rafael Devers, Austin Riley's come on over the last 2 years. I'm definitely forgetting someone in that
Yeah, just read the
conversation.
whole damn list before we start. Let's.
I'm just saying, we got some elite talent there. We've got some guys who, shuffle around the infield and play the position sometimes. So, we'll get into our list today. James, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. What about you?
I'm doing great, doing great. And I think,
Yeah, I know.
we got a great video episode in store for everyone here today. So, all right. So we're going to start off with honorable mentions, I imagine. So,
Yeah, coming in at number 12 and 11 on our list, we have Brian Hayes of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Obviously, great defender, great glove, so we know kind of what to expect there. And then Yandy Diaz, who had obviously the best season of his career last year. And I've heard some people expect a little more from him next year, even like a step up from last year or to stay close to that. I'd expect a little bit of a down turn from that 146 WRC plus 4 WAR season that he had last year. I don't really see him as that type of hitter, but Steamer does. They see him as a 138, 3.8 F4. So maybe he could be that high. And honestly, like Diaz would make most top 10 lists. It just happens to be that this position is fucking loaded.
well,
What are your
when it comes
thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, when it comes to Brian Hayes, I mean, I think he's a classic case of, you feel like any year you can kind of have that offensive season and kind of, I guess, break out. We saw, early on in his career, he was excellent. Even the max exit velocities, 113 mile per hour max exit velocity, 91 miles an hour on average. He just hits the ball into the ground way too much. He doesn't generate enough barrels for your liking. So, I think any given year he can kind of have that, even if it's a 105, 110 WRC plus, he's a slam dunk top 10 third baseman just because of his defense. I think this might be the first time in a very long time that I think to myself, the best defensive third baseman is not Nolan Arenado. He's not even the best. He might not be the best defensive third baseman in his division. As for Yandy Diaz, I know the defense is bad there, but I'm pretty sure I had him on my top 10. Just the offensive numbers are way too good. The batted ball data is, I get it, it's questionable with the ground balls, but he still hits the ball really hard and he has unbelievable plate discipline. So, just on my end, I would have had him top 10, but I think this is a good point for us to actually get into our top 10.
Yeah, and coming in at number 10, we have Eugenio Suarez of the Seattle Mariners. Obviously, great year from Suarez last year. We saw him hit a lot of home runs. He cut down on the strikeouts a little bit, I believe. No, career high in strikeouts. That's why I remember it. But again, 31 homers, kind of what we've come to expect out of Suarez. A big year with the power, but low average, kind of low on base percentage. Not great defense, but not like horrible, right? And a 4 WAR. And I think Steamer's really low on him coming into next year. They project just 107 WRC plus, which might be fair. He had a really bad year in 2021 and wasn't great in 2020, but in 19, 18, 17, he was one of the better third basemen in the league. And part of the reason I think he was so bad last year was they had him playing shortstop, which is not his position. So I think back at third base on a solid Mariners team, I expect another good year from Suarez next season.
Yeah, so looking at Suarez, the obvious reason why Steamer's like regressing outside of what you mentioned with the bad years sandwiched in between 2019 and 2022 is really they were really regressing his BABIP. Now in his career as a 300 BABIP guy between 2017 and 2019, when those 3 best consecutive years, he had a 314 BABIP, and then if you look at 2020 and 2021, we're talking 221, right? And then this year back up to 302. I think it all kind of relies on the BABIP, right? The isolated power actually went down from 2020 and even from 2021. He walked less than he did in 2020, more than he did in 2021. As you mentioned, he struck out more than ever in his career at 31.2%. So just kind of looking at all the overall all-around skills here when it comes to Eugenio Suarez, I think the clear factor here that changed back into his favor was the BABIP, and I expect that to remain the case. So I'm a lot higher on his BABIP than projections are. The BAT X has him as a 117, which I think is a little bit more of a fair number, but I'd be a little more generous with his and go even as high as to say 125. I don't think that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't expect a huge regression in the BABIP, given that he's kind of been around there in his career. Obviously not so much the last couple of years, like I was talking about those two really bad years. So maybe it just comes down to his bad whether he has a good year or not. But he's 312, 322, 309, 304, 341, 316 in the first 6 years of his career. I wouldn't expect any reason why that 302 is not sustainable. And honestly, it might go back up to that, 310, 320 range, which, you know, could have another 135 WRC plus season like he did in 2018. Moving on to number 9 on our list, we have Anthony Rendon of the Los Angeles Angels. And now I would like to, I guess we never said this, but Jack's list is also counted in here, even though he's not recording with us today. He's the one who put Rendon on this list because I had him at 10 and you didn't have him at all. So I think both of us are a little lower on him than this spot, but not by much, not a big issue. I think Rendon, it's a little concerning that he is not, like, how do I put this? He didn't have a good year last year. He didn't have a good year before that. He's very injury prone, which is a little scary. But we know that the ceiling is there, right? He could bounce back, have another 4 or 5 win season. I wouldn't really be that surprised. So, I mean, what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, so we're talking about Rendon here. The way I look at it is, can you say that there's that chance, that upside that he stays healthy? He has that really good year and he goes back to being a great third baseman. Absolutely, that's totally in the cards. But it's unfair, I think, to other third basemen to, number one, say that we're looking at the distribution of results here that could be Anthony Rendon's season, to say that median or that kind of like that 50th percentile outcome is really high enough to justify putting him over other guys in the list. I think 10's a good spot to put him if you're going to be on the higher end here. But not to kind of like single out Jack here. I just would have ranked him that high. I didn't rank him at all. I think that I still think the ceiling is there for him to be an all-star level player again, but I don't think we're going to see the MVP years again. And then more importantly, right, like this all depends on health. He could be really good for 60 games next year, and you're still not going to rank him much higher than 10th, if even at all.
Yeah, I agree. I think with Rendon, you kind of have to expect, like, I'll have to see it to believe it, right? It's not one of those things where we can kind of just project a better year from him. He's been, I mean, quite frankly, he's been awful the past 2 years since he got to LA. He had that solid year in 2020, but then again, like 60 games, he only played 52. He did have a great year. Not to take anything away from him, but he has one WAR in 105 games in the last 2 years. I don't, I just like nothing stands out to me here. He's walking less. He's hitting the ball. He's not hitting the ball as hard. His BABIP's down. His batting average is down. Basically, his numbers are down across the board. Even his glove was bad over the past 2 years, which we haven't seen from him in the past. It was pretty, league average, but now it's looking a lot worse. I just don't. I think Rendon, he could bounce back, but it's starting to look like his career might be coming, to a very quick ending here. Moving on to number 8, we have Matt Chapman of the Toronto Blue Jays. We were all kind of in a consensus here around this 8, 9, 7 range for Chapman. He had another good year last year with the bat. He took a step back with the glove, surprisingly enough. He's a 3-time platinum glove, 3-time gold glove winner, 2-time platinum glove winner. But he got out to a slow start with the bat last year, but then he ended the year with a 117 WRC plus, 4.1 F4. And I think it's really hard for me to buy into, that drastic downfall with the glove. I can't imagine that he'd be anything like that last season, once again in 2023. But I mean, what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, so Matt Chapman, as you mentioned last year, he kind of had that return, not necessarily to his peak years, but offensively speaking, at least some of his better years. Again, I don't buy into the defensive regression very much either. I think Matt Chapman, I've tweeted this before, I believe he's the most underrated position player in baseball. I think that if we're looking at free agents, right, if he repeats last year, if he lives up to his projections, anything of that sort, we're talking about a guy who next year is going to get a good chunk of money. I mean, 2021, you would say is like a floor year for Matt Chapman, and that was a 4.1 WAR, right? So if we're talking about floors, we're talking about ceilings and median outcomes and all those different things, I think you could make an argument that Matt Chapman is the most underrated third baseman in the league and the most underrated position player in baseball, but the talent on this list is too good to move him up very much.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. Moving in at number 7, we have Gunnar Henderson of the Baltimore Orioles. Henderson had, he had a great start to his career last year when he came up, but 126 WRC plus. Obviously, small sample size, only 132 plate appearances, 34 games, but he's the number one prospect in all of baseball, I believe, ranked pretty much consensus, right?
Carroll might be ranked above him in certain lists.
Yeah, but I
Might
mean,
be.
I think the general consensus here is that if not one, he's two or
Right. No,
three.
no, he's
He's
amazing.
obviously he's an elite prospect. 22 and entering his 22-year-old season. Um, Zips has him at 5 WAR, Steamer 4.1, and depth charts 4.2. So I mean, not really, pretty for a rookie, pretty consistently high projections across the board. I would expect him to win the Rookie of the Year next year, but obviously, who knows? I know a lot of people aren't going to be happy with us ranking him this high. This is again Jack. Jack has a tendency to overrate rookies, I believe. At least in my opinion, he does. But on this one, I kind of agree with him. And again, I think it's different with Henderson because we've seen him at the major league level, whereas like a guy like Anthony Volpe, who you guys ranked and I didn't, we haven't, right? And so we know Henderson. The other thing we know is that Henderson is going to be up there on opening day. He'll be there opening day, starting third baseman most likely, as barring any like trade. Maybe he could end up playing shortstop, but either way, um he'll be in the starting lineup on opening day, and so there's a little more confidence with him than some other rookies that we've ranked so far.
Yeah, no, and I think the big thing here with Gunnar Henderson is, defensively, I think he is a better profiled for the second, or not second base, excuse me, third base shortstop position. Actually, I don't think he should be playing second base. He performed pretty poorly there. He's more of an arm guy defensively, which I think will hold up well in the hot corner. The max exit velocities, the 90th percentile, the average exit velocities, all that stuff, the sprint speed. I mean, he's just one. You just know he's going to be a good major league player. We talk about the risk that comes with rookies, and there is always, doesn't matter how good of a prospect you are. Year one, your first full year, there's a wide distribution of results. You don't know if a guy slumps or whatever it may be. But I think we can agree here, this is one of the safer prospects, if not the safest prospect to rank very highly on your list going forward, or at least this year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I wouldn't be shocked if next year we're ranking him with, the Arenados and Bregmans of the league. But I like this ranking. I think it's a good spot for him. For now. But obviously, some people are going to think we're pretty high on him. Others, like Jack, might think we're low. I think it's a pretty good medium here. Obviously, at a position like this, it's kind of tough to get ranked much higher. Coming in at number 6, we have Rafael Devers of the Baltimore Red Sox. He had a huge year last year and then got a massive extension. I don't know exactly how to feel about Devers. It really makes no sense to me that Boston extended him for so much money and let everyone else walk. I've been pretty vocal about how I think about the Boston Red Sox off season. Sorry. The glove not great at all. He had 1 year, right, where he had like a 20 outs above average year, and but that year he wasn't
2018, I think it
great.
was.
I can check. 2019. I believe.
Gotcha.
Yeah, 19. He had a 7-win season that year, right? Because he put up 12 defensive value. He didn't even have the best offensive season in his career that year. If we see this offense with, not that defense, obviously, I'm not expecting Devers to put up a 17 OAA, right? That's not who he is.
Yeah,
But
it's not feasible.
can we get a 0 OAA and he'll move up this list, right? Um, it's just that I'm concerned about the glove is a net negative, right? It's a problem. But we look at it, and he's had a great start to his career. He's 25 years old and he has 18 WAR already. I would expect another 5-win season next year. I don't see why you wouldn't.
The way I look at it with Rafael Devers is, he's like him and Austin Riley are like they're like the same player. You know what I mean? Like they're so unbelievably similar. But it comes down to just that little bit of better offensive production over the last 2 years, that slightly better projected WRC plus, and just having one defensive metric that thinks you're better defensively than the other ones do. And quite frankly, with Devers, it's a little bit you feel a little concerned long term about how someone who's not playing defense well at the age of 27 is going to play defense at the age of 32. But quite frankly, we've seen David Ortiz before. I don't think Boston's going to regret it too much as long as Devers stays healthy, which he's not really had issues with that. He's a really, really, really good hitter. And again, this ranking, you say, oh, he's only the sixth best third baseman. Sure, he's only the sixth best third baseman, but he's still one of the best players in all of baseball. We're not talking a fringe top 50 or a fringe top 4, or 60 or 70, whatever guy. We're talking about, a perennial all-star elite player. And I don't think either of us are necessarily saying he's not elite. We're just saying that the other guys on the list are slightly more complete baseball players.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think with Devers, the glove isn't too concerning long term. I don't think he'll be a third baseman. He's a first baseman DH, right? Most likely, probably DH, given that they have a couple first base prospects, Tristan Casas, and who's the other one?
Nico Cavadas, though, he's not like, I wouldn't put him in the same conversation as Casas.
Obviously Devers and Casas, but moving forward to number 5, we have Austin Riley of the Atlanta Braves. Riley had another great year last year, right? 142 WRC plus 5.5 F4. Coming off of a year before that where he had a 136 and 4.7. So, we've seen 2 years in a row of of Riley being, close to an elite player. He's gotten MVP votes. He's, he struggled at first, but I think it's pretty safe to say that it's no longer a fluke. Like last year, there might have been an argument. Like a lot of people were making the argument that Riley shouldn't be this high because, it's only one good year and we saw him struggle at first. He had -6 OAA last year. It's a little concerning, but, he gets the slight edge, like you said, about Devers. It's really close. You could switch them back and forth. They're like, Chapman and Arenado were a few years ago. But I don't think you could put anyone in between them on this list.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. That comparison with Chapman and Arenado, I think is great too, because that was always the argument, a few years ago. It's like you cannot have like Arenado 3 and Chapman 5, or you cannot have Chapman 2 and Arenado 4. You just can't do that. They cannot be separated. Looking at Riley, I will say that, those doubt, the one thing I love about Riley and Devers' game is they are just extra base. They're ISO machines. You know what I mean? And those are always fun to watch. And I feel like they're a little more aggressive than your natural superstars. Typically, you see most guys putting up ridiculous WRC plus numbers. They have like a walk rate at least well above average. These two guys love to swing. These two guys love to crush. And I think going forward, it's going to be an interesting, back and forth over the next few years. And I hope it's because they're both playing very well.
Yeah, like you said, I really think that if you tiered off these rankings, right, that top 4 that we're going to get into in a second kind of separates themselves from Riley and Devers, who kind of separate themselves from the rest, right? And after number 6, like we're saying, these, the 7 through like 15 range, I think, there's obviously guys that separate themselves, but I don't think it's really that big of a difference. There's a lot of good third basemen in the league, and then there's also a lot of elite ones, but I think you can kind of separate it into those 3 tiers. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
Yeah, no, I definitely, if I'm going to give a tier, if I'm going to give, I think the gap between, I think it's very clear Riley and Devers are 6 and 7, or 5 and 6 in this.
5 and 6.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously I'm understating things with the tiering of like, the top 4, right? They might not be in the same tier, but they're above Riley and Devers.
Right. No,
more so my point.
Yeah.
So coming in at number 4, we had Alex Bregman. All 3 of us had him at number 4 on our list. I mean, Bregman I think he's becoming one of the most underrated players in the league. Part of it is because he's overshadowed in his own team, in his own lineup with Altuve and Alvarez and Tucker, who might all be better hitters than him. But Bregman, he's had 2 8-win seasons. He's projected next year for 5.8 by Zips, but 6.3 for like a full season by Zips. They're pretty high on him at a 147 WRC plus, which he hasn't put up since 2019. Bregman always seems to have those underlying metrics, right? The walk rate, the strikeout rate, the whiff rate. He has great batted ball data. More so great plate discipline. His batted ball data isn't the best. He doesn't barrel the ball a ton, but playing in Houston, it doesn't really matter that much. He's kind of a pulled fly ball guy, like we're always talking about, where he'll overperform his xWOBA by a little bit. He had a 5.5-win season last year, and it felt like no one was really talking about him. And that was only, with a 136 WRC plus. He had a step forward with the glove last year. And I just, it's at the point where I'm expecting a 5 or 6 win season out of uh Bregman rather than like it's like a hope, right? Like I'd
Yeah,
expect that from him last year, and then if possible, like it wouldn't shock me if he had another one of those seasons where he's thrust himself right in the MVP conversation.
Yeah, no, for sure. Alex Bregman last year, we know that 2020, or we found out that 2021 was kind of you have to put an asterisk next to that 120 WRC plus because he had some wrist issues, right? And it felt like this might have been his first fully healthy season where he kind of he's all the way back. He's not worrying about any swinging issues. He's dealt with some ticky tacky stuff before in his career, but we're talking about someone who's kind of like he's a future Hall of Famer. He's at 30.8 WAR before the age
He's
of
a future
29.
deserved Hall of Famer.
Right.
I don't know how this Astros thing is going to play out. Like, I wonder with Altuve and Bregman especially, and Correa, because all three of them are on Hall of Fame tracks.
Yeah, the Beltron thing scares me a little bit
Yeah, the
because
fact that because Beltran should have made it first ballot.
he's an easy Hall of Famer.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a little concerning, but Bregman will have 60 WAR by the end of his career, pretty much without a doubt. I feel like.
Yeah, and one big thing here that goes into it with Alex Bregman, we talk about complete resumes when it comes to, projecting for 2023. You want to be safe with your projections. You want to be safe with how you evaluate a player. If we get the defense we got out of Bregman this year, and we're able to get, that second half offense, and we see that isolated power has come all the way back, it's going to be hard to keep Bregman out of the same discussion as some of the guys ahead of him. I think it's safe to say that Bregman's kind of, for now at least, right? I don't want people to think we're saying this in a, insulting manner. I think for now it's comfortable to say Arenado, Machado, and J-Ram, who we'll get into in a bit, are not clearly better right now at least. But next year I think is a good year for us to see a nice 2019 like season for Bregman.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely like a tier below the other three, like we were talking about before. But yeah, he could easily be number one on this list next year, and I really wouldn't be that surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very excited to see how he plays next year, especially considering, as you mentioned, he's gonna be, or he plays at Houston. He's gonna be all the way back healthy. So a guy with an elite sprays should age pretty well.
So now coming in at number 3, we have Nolan Arenado, and all three of these guys that we're gonna mention soon, in whatever order, are the 1, 2, 3. You could put Arenado 1, you could put Ramirez 1, you could put Machado 1. I think all three of them have a pretty strong argument. But we went with Arenado the lowest. Part of it is that, at least to me, is that he had that really bad year a couple years ago. His batted ball data is not great. His XWOB was low, but that's not really too concerning. He doesn't strike out very much at all anymore. He hit like 300, 350, 500 last year. He's a great hitter, a great defender. He's an elite defender even. He's probably the best defender at the position in the league. You said you might go with Hayes. But either way, they're like 1 and 2. They're neck and neck, right? I think Arenado has multiple platinum gloves. He's got multiple gold gloves. He's a very decorated player at this point. He has 6 platinum gloves. That's nuts. 5-time Silver Slugger, 7-time All-Star. So I don't see any reason to expect anything short of another 6 to 7 win year next year.
Yeah, this is we talk about Bregman, future Hall of Famer. This is an easy Hall of Famer. This is going to be like
slam dunk Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
all three of these guys are.
Yeah,
the top four on this list are all easy Hall of Famers as long as of course the
no one gets seriously hurt.
Get it.
Or also no one gets seriously hurt. They just exist for the next 10 years. I think they'll get in. Nolan Arenado, as you mentioned, the gloves elite, the offense. I think a big thing for him was having his best offensive season of his career come in a year out of Coors. I think that's going to be huge for him. I think there were some concerns, he's 113 WRC plus, left Coors. I think the timing of it was very concerning. But it looked like, okay, he kind of regressed from, MVP caliber player to, a little bit more of just a good third baseman, right? Kind of how we would talk about Matt Chapman right now, you know what I mean? Kind of falling from that, MVP caliber performance to this. And then he comes out, he has his best year of his career. You could argue he deserved the MVP. It would have been cool to see him get an MVP, but I think Goldschmidt getting one is equally as cool. Again, he could be two on this list. He could be one on this list. I quite frankly don't have too much of a dispute with either point. But this is more of us getting a chance to talk about one of the best players of our generation.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think a lot of people overreacted to the whole course thing. I mean, I wouldn't, and I'm not saying that I didn't either, but we're looking at a guy who has had now 6 win seasons, and then won 5.9 4 times, and then obviously with the 5.9 V5. Um, he's projected 5.2 by Steamer, 5.8 by depth charts, 5.6 by Zips. I don't obviously these projections are going to be pretty conservative in general. They very rarely project a guy to have a 6 win season. But he's a 6 win player, so I don't see a reason not to expect that next year. Moving in to the number 2 spot on this list, we have the guy who I put number 1, but you guys both put number well, I guess you had him at 3, is Manny Machado of the San Diego Padres. Machado last year, I think, probably deserved the NL MVP over Goldschmidt. I think both Arenado and Machado did, but it was really neck and neck between all 3 of them. It wasn't too much of an issue. The whole even year Machado thing was stupid to begin with, and he completely shut down whatever people still believed in that this year with that MVP caliber season where he put up a 152 WRC plus, 7.4 F4. The best season, I would argue, of his career. He had that one year where he was playing shortstop with the Dodgers that he had, an amazing year. But he's 29 years old and he's already at 47 F4. This is a guy, like, we're not just talking about a future Hall of Famer. Like, Machado is a future top 5 third baseman of all time. And
yeah,
like, and I don't think he gets that level of respect. He gets the future Hall of Fame respect, but I don't think he gets the, like, we're going to be talking about this guy as a top, 50 to 40 player of all time by the end of his career.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out is the fact that, we're looking at Bryce Harper and Manny Machado at the same stages of their career. Machado leads the WAR the WAR category for now.
Yeah,
I know
and
WARs and everything.
those two MVPs really help Harper's argument there. But Harper's also, after that MVP season last year, this year he's gonna miss 80 or 90 games like we talked about last episode.
DH.
Yeah, and then DH. Like, unless he can really turn this injury thing around, it's starting to look like it could be a massive issue.
I'm not concerned about Harper not falling short of the Hall of Fame or anything like that.
Oh no, definitely not.
We're more so talking about
we're talking about a guy who's won the MVP twice.
Right. I think more so we're talking about if we're going to, because Machado and Harper, I think, are kind of like they've just kind of mirrored careers very similarly, where it's the free agency, all that stuff. But in a sense, these two guys are both clearly Hall of Famers. I think Harper kind of gets already that top 100, one of the greatest players we'll ever see, talk. And I think Machado should start getting that conversation a lot more. He's entering his age 30 season with a chance to surpass 50 WAR. He could be, a 33-year-old with what? I mean, he'd be a 33-year-old with 60 WAR. You know what I mean? That's not completely out of the picture. Which I think is a testament to how great he is and how great he's hopefully going to continue to be.
Yeah, and for me, it's not just that with Machado, like you were saying. If you add on to that, we're talking about a guy here who's also improving. Like Harper, that's the contrast I was trying to make. I don't know if I really fully got the point across. Is Harper's career feels like it's moving down, whereas Machado seems to be trending up, even though he's had these 2 massive years in a row. Well, actually now 3, right? Because that 2020 season, the shortened year with the 150.
Yeah, that's another thing. Plus. If he got to play, because he played all 60 games that year, if they had a full season, he would have 50 WAR, right? He would.
Right. He'd be close.
Well, you would have to add. Let's see, it's 46.6.
It's 3.4, so you have to have a 6. Yeah, he easily would.
I don't know, easily. It might have been a little close because that's what a 3.4. It's a 6 WAR season.
It's a 6 WAR season, but with a 150 WRC plus and that defense, that's an easy 6 as long as he stays healthy.
Right, but I guess the
but then again, the health thing, he played all 60 of the 60 games. It's not really
it's just
he got hurt.
This is a guy who, with out of global pandemic, would be probably a 50-win player before the age of 30, which is insane, and it's kind of crazy he's 30. He's kind of
like Machado to me, he feels like a 33-year-old. But you look back, and it's the reason for this, obviously, is because he debuted at 19. And then he had a 5-win season at the age of 20. So in 2013 with the Orioles. He had 23.2 defensive value, 102 WRC plus in 5 WAR season. That's a crazy year. If he could get anything close to that glove, we could honestly see a 10-win season. But that's probably not realistic. But 8 wouldn't shock me because, like I was saying, he's still trending up. It feels like.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Coming in at the number 1 now is Jose Ramirez of the Cleveland Guardians, and I think so far he's the only player we've had hold his position at number 1. At catcher, obviously Adley's new. At first, we switched, I think, Vlad for Freeman. Yeah, so I mean, this
second
is the
base
first.
Do you think
second base was Simeon, and now it's
shortstop was Tatis.
We didn't do that yet. Oh, but yeah, I think so. So I mean, if we're looking at players keeping their number 1 spot, and I don't know if Trout's going to keep his at center field.
Going to next year?
Yeah, maybe.
We'll get there. I mean, I'm pretty confident in that, but
yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll get there, and then at right field, obviously, we had probably Soto last year, I'd assume.
Yeah,
this year
or Betts or no, that wasn't Betts. I think Jack was low on Betts that year.
No, because I'm always high on Betts, and
I said Jack might have been low on Betts, and
yeah.
That's why.
But going back to what we were saying with the third base, Jose Ramirez has kind of been like the class of third base, right? Like the best player there, the standard for years. He had that one bad half of a year in 2019, right? Remember, it was bad. It was really bad, like memorably bad. But the second half of that year, he stepped up, or it might have been the other way around. I'm not fully sure. 2 6-win seasons in a row now. He probably should have won the MVP the year before that, the Abreu year. It should have been one of those 2 Guardians, or I guess at the time Indians, Bieber or Ramirez. But we're looking now, and Ramirez is kind of established himself as the number 1 here. I believe, at least for you guys. I had Machado. I don't think it's a huge difference. What do you think?
Yeah, so I feel inclined to say that Jose Ramirez, because I said it's for everyone else. Jose Ramirez is also a future Hall of Famer, guys. This is, I mean, he didn't
a question.
Yeah, he didn't have the same start to his career that Arenado, Arenado and Machado especially did.
Yeah, and Bregman.
Right, and Bregman.
Because Bregman came out of nowhere, not out of nowhere.
He had a 4-1 season his first year.
Yeah, and then his second and third years, he had 2 8-win seasons in a row. So I mean, Ramirez, obviously, it was kind of like a slower increase for him, but he had a breakout year in 2016, and since then he's been up there with the best third baseman in the league. And at first he was I wrote this in the article I wrote about third baseman. I said for a while he was one of the most underrated players in the league, right? But for the last 3-4 years he's been kind of getting the respect he deserves.
It just sucks he doesn't have an MVP. That sucks so much.
He should have had one too, which is what's worse.
This is how I feel like with him and Nolan Arenado, where it's like, dude, I mean, Arenado, I feel like is in a conference, is in a league where, it's going to always kind of be open for at least next year. The AL is just tough, man. He's got to compete with Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani.
And then now Shohei Ohtani. Like, for years,
and Aaron Judge.
The question was 50-50, will Trout win the MVP this year, right? And now Ohtani, I think his odds are plus 200, which would be by 30-something%. But I would at this point, I think it's much higher than that Ohtani wins the MVP again, because it's really Judge put up a historic season. He put up 62 home runs and 11 WAR last year. Yeah, and it was a question. For a lot of people, it was a question.
And not just a question, in the sense of could you make the argument? You could have made a legitimate point. There's still, we could come back in 5 years and say we got the MVP wrong with new data. I don't think we've ruled that out entirely yet.
It's such a big gap, though.
I feel like I do think there's a big gap.
And what data do you think we'd find that we don't already have with Ohtani? What the value of that extra roster spot is, or how much money? I think the money thing is such a huge question. We talked about this last time, but that's not really he's at the MVP because he was the most valuable to his contract. That's not fair, because then Ramirez should win every year.
And also, I guess the one thing I really want to touch up on here with, talking about Jose Ramirez, and I guess kind of wrapping up that little segment about Ohtani, is number one, Ohtani is just kind of like that. He feels very much like having Patrick Mahomes right now in the NFL. Not even you can even say that because Mahomes, he won his second one today, but there are multiple years where he wasn't the clear cut winner. Otani, I feel like he's also got the fact that he didn't win it last year, so there's not going to be voters fatigue. I think that's fair to say too. I think Trout kind of suffered from just every year being better than everyone else, really, and then that one Mookie Betts year, and then that's kind of always been.
And that Betts year, like we look at that as one of the best seasons by a right fielder of all time.
Like end of the day,
and I think that Betts year is the best since Bonds, right?
Yeah,
other than Judge.
I think the craziest thing here is that you mentioned you kind of compared Otani to what Trout felt like 5 years ago. It took that like best whenever you say since Bonds, we're talking about something special. You know what I mean? So we're sitting here saying,
because like you have to say since Bonds, because then it would always be like, oh well, Bonds did it. Bonds did everything. He did
right. No, I'm just saying like any time that you can say that it's in this last century, it's you and Barry Bonds, you're in pretty good territory. You're pretty good company. So, the fact that it took a historic season for Mookie Betts, the fact that it took, the most home runs since Bonds and the highest WAR since Bonds, the highest and a 200 WRC plus. Guys, it took a 200 WRC plus to beat him. So, J-Rab's going to have to kind of have, that 160 something WRC plus with elite defense to kind of pray for, something to go his way because it sucks. He might not ever get an MVP, but I don't think that should hold him back. I think it should kind of be like a rolling situation, where it's like
it shouldn't be anything close to a rolling situation.
I mean, in terms of how smart people view Roland as a really, really, really good player, right? Like unbelievable third baseman. I'm not saying I want Jose Ramirez on the ballot for 3 or 4, however many years it took.
Roland was on there for a while.
The way I'm saying it is more so like people should view him as just this uber elite player that is so good at everything, and he had those peak years, and it's not like just because he's never won an MVP, he wasn't. I mean, there was an argument before kind of Otani in 2021, that little gap between 2021 and 2020, where like maybe Jose Ramirez might be the most reliable player for best player in baseball just because of how injured Trout was getting at that point. But special player here, guys.
Yeah, I think we can kind of wrap it up there. Thank you all for listening. Ryan, do you have any final thoughts?
No, not currently, but I'm pretty happy with this list, to say the least.
Yeah, I think this one I agree with the most because Jack didn't do any egregious shit like he's done in the past. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would like to say I love Jack, but sometimes the list isn't. Sometimes
thank you all for listening, and we will see you in episode 82.
Yeah.